All right. As everybody's kind of coming in. Oh, this morning has flown by. A lot of great information, a lot of great speakers. We're looking forward. We think this agenda we really worked hard on this agenda, so we hope that you guys get enough information out of it and it's beneficial to you. So I am going to talk about conflict of interest, sort of. I want to preference that. I am not going to tell you what a conflict of interest is. I am not going to determine if you have one, okay, as we're here today. What I really want to focus on with this presentation has to do with the form that you fill out and you upload, okay, to us. So for the counties, if you go into the statute, well, hold on a minute. Let me back up because I have a new thing. We have new slides, and so just wanted to introduce you to Paul Joyce again, the state examiner that spoke here this morning. So we included him in our slide deck, just so friendly face, right? All right. So conflict of interest disclosure. The only thing I have here on the statute is really the disclosure itself, but the statute tells what the disclosure must include in it, but the reason that we're going to be talking about this really has to do with how you report it, right? So if you have a conflict of interest, you're required to disclose that, and the way you do it is by filling out the form, take it to your county clerk, okay, and then you upload it for State Board of Accounts. Okay, that's straight from the statute, which is why we're talking about it today. Okay, we're going to talk about that upload process and the change to the form. As you know, if somebody in the county has a conflict of interest, it is up to them to submit it. Okay, we don't take an audit position if you have a policy inside your county to where you are submitting it. Auditors typically, I don't think, do a whole lot of submitting. Sometimes that happens with the clerks because they take it to the clerk and they think, oh, the clerk's going to submit it for me. Honestly, we really don't recommend the clerk doing that because it's your conflict of interest. And, just like when somebody comes into your office and you take something, if it doesn't get uploaded, then it could be a problem, right? So if you have the conflict of interest, we suggest that you upload it so that you make sure that you're in compliance, that you have filed it, okay? Because it's an individual thing. It's not a county requirement, right? Because the county's not the conflict of interest. You as the individual are the conflict of interest or have the conflict of interest. All right, so how many of you guys have used the conflict of interest tool? I feel like that's not very many. Okay, let's just ask one more time. How many of you have used the conflict of interest tool? A little more hands. Okay. This makes it easy. In some of our upload tools, before those became available, you would send them to our office. And then we'd have to file them manually and do all this. This makes it to where you submit it online and it becomes a public document. So anybody in your county can go and look to see if you filed a conflict of interest. And believe me, they do, okay? So anything that's decided through the county, if you have got some sort of business that's involved or something, inevitably a citizen's going to go look it up, and then when they can't find it, guess who they call? Just guess. So it does get a little tricky sometimes on the years when you do it, but you do need to file it every year. So if you do have a conflict of interest, you would file a new one every single year, okay? All right, so this should look kind of familiar, right? This is the gateway page that you would go to for the tool. Trying to keep track of time. I don't like this either. Okay, so this didn't really change. It is open to anybody. You don't have to have a username to sign in. Anybody can upload a conflict of interest. We made it like that on purpose, right? Because not everybody has gateway upload access. So like you guys not only have your uploads, but you have your AFRs. Well, commissioners do a bunch of stuff, but they don't have to upload anything monthly. So if they had a conflict of interest, we wouldn't have to give sign-ins to everybody, right? So this enables them to be able to do it without having a sign-in. So the page still looks exactly the same, but what we did do is kind of make a change. And so I've kind of tried to highlight it on these slides that you can see. And so in this case, it's the form. So we never had a really great form. We kind of found a form that met all the requirements, and that's what we were using, but we think it was a little bit confusing to fill out. And so there was lots of different answers and stuff happening on it. As we were kind of reading through it, it wasn't consistent. So one county might do it one way, or one individual would do it one way and one would do it differently. So we were kind of trying to figure out, how do we get the information, simplify it so that it's easier to fill out as you're going along. And so what I really want to do is just kind of go over the changes of that form in and of itself, so that you can kind of see it and see what we have done to change it. Okay, so this form is actually 3 pages long. I tried to divide it in half. So each slide is going to be like half the form. So at the top of this form, we have the statute here that talks about the conflict of interest, and what from the statute, what is the conflict of interest, who has to file it. What I really want you to pay attention on this slide is at the very, very bottom. Did anybody see the very, very bottom in red? Okay, that says legal counsel should be consulted. I'm not legal counsel. I'm not an attorney. So if you call me, I'm not going to be able to help you to fill out that form. So if there's any questions about it, please contact your county counsel, okay? Let them help you through that process to make sure that you include all the pertinent information that's required. Okay. All right, so as you go down through it, a lot of this stuff, again, it's the same information. We just kind of changed it a little bit just to kind of parse it out a little bit, make it a little bit easier to read. When you go down through the slide, through the form, obviously they want to know your name and your address, that information, job title. That stuff was all on the other form. One thing that we did do is we separated some stuff out. This was all kind of a combined section, and we thought, what if we pull these and made them a little bit separate? Because really the information's a little bit different that's required for both. And so we added an additional section. And so in this part, and we'll get to it here in a minute, we tried to put directions so that it would be easy to see that if you have a conflict of interest that is from entering into a contract, you're going to complete section 3. Okay. But if you have a conflict of interest that's around the purchase of goods or services without a contract, then you're going to go to section 4. Don't have to fill out both, just which one are you doing? Okay. So we thought that made it a little bit more clear, and we'll go through each one of those sections here in a minute. All right, we'll start with section 3. Section 3 and section 4, have similar information in them, but we just kind of broke them out. So again, section 3 is what you're going to kind of provide if you have a contract, right? So if you own a business and the county's going to contract with that business, those kinds of things, and you have that contract, this is the information. There is a lot here, right? It's going to, again, want the legal name and address of the contractor, full name and address of a dependent, if applicable. It wants to know the governmental entity that's entering into the contract, the relationship of the public servant, what the specific owning interest is, the start date and end date of the contract, the total dollar amount of the contract, wants to give what is that specific financial interest, and then on here it also includes the date of the public meeting and the name of the governmental entity that accepted the contract, okay? And again, that date has to be prior to the final action of the contract or the purchase. All right. I know this isn't fun stuff. That's all for Friday, just FYI. Okay, so Again, so now we have section 4, and this is for goods and services. So if you, I'm trying to think of an example. You owned maybe a local hardware store where they were coming and going and buying some supplies, and you had a conflict of interest. Just one of many examples. This would be where you would fill out the information here. It wants you to describe, the goods or the services purchased. State the total dollar amount of each purchase. You'd put the full legal name of the vendor. Again, the name of the governmental unit making the purchase. What your specific ownership interest is in that. Full name and address. The purchase date. If you have specific financial interest that's derived as a result of the purchase, it wants to know that. And again, it wants to know the date of the public meeting. All right. Okay, so after you've filled out those sections above, you're going to come down, and again, we have another kind of split. So again, I'm highlighting on this is that if you're a public servant that is appointed, then you're going to complete section 5. All others would complete section 7, okay? Or 6, sorry. Turn to page, read a number.
Hi, Ricky.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So I know it asked for the specific date of purchase and amount. In the past, we've had a commissioner who has a business that he has an interest in, and the county has purchased some things. And he has filed a conflict of interest like on January 1st of every year and has made the conflict of interest form very broad. Is that allowable, or does it have to be for each purchase?
I believe it needs to be for each purchase because it really wants that specific dollar amount. Okay, so what? No, I don't. But I got it. All right, she had an idea, and when I talk to her and understand it, I will let you know. All right, sorry, I switched pages. Okay.
Hold on.
Oh, I didn't know we had more questions. Okay, sorry.
I didn't know either.
Oh, I just did it last minute.
So I have a councilwoman who got the contract from our EMS department to do our collections. How would I put that on the form?
Okay, wait a minute. Say that to me one more time.
I have a councilwoman.
Okay.
Her husband's an attorney, so they own a law office.
Okay.
And she does collections for people who don't pay their bills.
Okay.
She got the contract from the county to do that for our EMS department.
Okay. So
I don't have specific dollar amounts or anything like
that. But you have a contract, right? So
Yes.
there's got to be something on what they've agreed to pay.
Maybe like a percentage?
Could be.
Just do that?
Yeah, and you may have to estimate depending on what you think it might be, but look at your contract first in the wording. There's got to be something in there that lets you know how much you're going to give her, right? So whether that's, I get 10% of this, or, you know what I mean? And then we can kind of go from there.
Okay, so just the percentage.
Making sure. Okay. All right. So again, as we move down from that, we're talking about section 5 and section 6. So section 5 is if you are a public servant that is appointed, which would not be you. And all other public servants would do section 6. And so this is just, so for the appointed one, it just wants to know the date of the appointment, the approval of the conflict of interest, and then the signatures. And then for public servants, we're looking for the approved by the government entity at the public body. So the date it was submitted and the date the public meeting was, the public meeting on the conflict interest form was accepted. I knew this was not going to take 30 minutes, but that's okay. We can talk. All right, as we kind of go down the form, section 7 is the affirmation of the public servant. So this is just where you are, submitting it, submitting it and it's accepted. Basically, you are affirming that it is all true, right? It's kind of like we do with other things. So you'll fill out that information. And then section 8 is just talks about those filing requirements. So one thing here is these filing requirements are due within 15 days after the final action on the contractor purchase. Okay, so once it's done, it needs to be to the county clerk and it needs to be uploaded to Gateway. Conflict of interest gets kind of tricky, right? Because it's really in the criminal code if you go and look at it. We look at it, first of all, it's weird. They put it in there, right? So we have to collect the information that's part of statute. But we do not go in and determine really anything about the conflict of interest. We do look to make sure something, if we're doing an audit and we see that it's happened, we will go look. We typically do a lot more than that if we find something where we think it's a conflict of interest. So as an example, if we were out doing an audit and we saw a relationship that looked like it should have a conflict of interest and we go to Gateway and we look up to see if one's been there and we don't see it, we don't just instantly give you a finding, okay? A lot of times we push that forward to our attorneys, make sure that what we think should have a conflict of interest disclosure is appropriate, because as you guys probably know, sometimes nepotism gets confused with conflict of interest. It happens, and so sometimes things change, so we need to make sure everybody's on the same page. But we are only auditing for compliance of submission of the form, okay? So I want to make sure that that is clear. So we do not go in and determine anything else really about the form, okay? We can help you with uploading it. We can help you with, if you have a question about something, like maybe something's written on the form you don't understand, we might be able to interpret that for you. But for your specific situation, I'm going to send you back to your county attorney, which my attorney is like, yes, please. So a couple things that I do want to talk about as well is how many of you in here have a policy that everybody fills out a conflict of interest even if they don't have one? I knew there were a couple counties that do. That is not required, okay? We're not going to take audit exception if you do it, but it's an awful lot of paperwork to do if it's not necessary. Statute only requires you to do this if there's a conflict of interest, so if one exists. So I just wanted to make sure and clarify that. I think some people think everybody just does one. That's just what you do, and that's not necessarily the case, right? It's easier to sort through too if we're only entering the ones that we do, because when you go into Gateway, has anybody ever tried to look up a conflict of interest? So if you are a county that's doing, everybody's doing, you have to go through, and depending on how you name them, right? Because, let me see if I can go back to this. Too far. Okay, so you upload your file, you have it a file name as it's uploaded. We don't name them. So if you were just conflict of interest 1, conflict of interest 2, and you did one for everybody, it's really hard to sort through to determine which ones we're looking for, okay? So I would say be kind of mindful on how you name them as well. This is public information. People do search this. We search this. I bet your council and commissioners probably search this. So be kind of cognizant of that. Again, this does fall onto the individual who is responsible for filing it. It's not anybody else's responsibility. I can't stress that one enough. If sometimes what will happen too is if we go and look, we don't see one, but sometimes we can call the clerk and the clerk says, well, I got it. It was filed with me. But that second step isn't being done. So if anybody asks you guys about it or comes down and talks to you about the conflict of interest, just make sure they understand it's filed in 2 separate places, okay? And that it's their responsibility to file in both. All right. And the last one I'm going to say just again and reiterate is that your county attorney should be consulted when questions arise about the conflict of interest. So again, if you're questioning whether you have one, if you don't really know how to fill out the form, they are probably the best people to go and sit with, because everything that's on that form we took out of the statute to try to make it as easy as possible. But again, it is kind of a legal document, right? So make sure you talk to them, make sure that everything's included in there. They will walk you through. If they don't know, if you don't have something, they'll tell you where you need to go grab it. Again, if you have a contract, use that contract. That contract's going to have a lot of information in it. Other than that, you may have to do a little bit of digging if you own like a certain interest in a business or just a piece of it. You may need to have something, figure out what part you own in that makes that conflict of interest. All right. Anybody have any questions without asking me if it's a conflict of interest? Yeah. Okay. Do they need a conflict of interest?
Repeat it.
Okay. She asked if a pharmacist on the board of health would need a conflict of interest. Well, I'm going to ask you, do you think they need one? So I'm just going to ask questions because I can't tell you. Sorry. You like my answer? Look, she's okay, I want a gold star when we're done here. Okay, so my question for you is the county in any kind of contract with the pharmacy? Does serving as on the board and being on the pharmacy, does that give her any kind of, or him, I don't know if it's him or her, any kind of pecuniary interest? Do they get anything from that? No. I mean, if we went to, wait, that's not the right one. That is it. I'm learning the clicker. Oh, I didn't put it in this one, so maybe it is in the other one. I can't read anything. I'm sorry. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm at that point in my life where I'm on the edge of having to get, what are they called? Bifocals, or what's the other? Starts with a P. What? Progressive. Whoever said that. That's where I'm at in my life. Okay. So then it talks here, you have a pecuniary interest in a contract or purchase if the contract or purchase will result or is intended to result in an ascertainable increase in the income or net worth of a public servant or a dependent of a public servant. So you got to think about it from that way too. Just because they do something may not cause a conflict of interest. Could, but it may not. I know, right? Good, right? Did I do that? Yeah. There is no, as she said, I'm saying you don't have to do it if you don't have a conflict of interest, but there's no penalty if you choose to do it. Okay? All right. How much do we learn about conflict of interest? How much do we love conflict of interest? Right? Okay.
No.
Oh, I got you.
It's me.
It's you.
Yeah.
I'm a few minutes early, but I think we can shuffle it.
Does anyone need the QR code? It is a lot. Okay. It's just a lot of work for me to keep coming back here. So I'm going to throw it up real quick. Just once a day. So if you did it this morning.
Yep.
Ricky, I have no idea how to get.
I can't help you. I only have a clicker.
Is that it?
I want to tell you guys that I came here last night, sat on the porch, I talked to several of you, and I missed my child's band concert just for you. I know. And he plays guitar, and he had solos, but I have a video I am assured of at home. I had told Tony that if I had it, I might play it, but I don't have it. I know. I'm very excited about it. He called me last night. He was like, just on cloud nine. You know, when your kids like really love something and they do great, but I missed it for you. I told him, them auditors really need me, bud.
Does whoever needed it, did they scan it?
Do we got it scanned? Do we need the code?
Can I take it down?
I don't know. She's looking back.
Yes?
Get
Okay.
it? Excuses. It's fine. Oh, she took it away. All right, we are going to turn it over to Stacy. She's going to talk to you about appropriations and encumbrances. That is awesome. We're getting ready for encumbrances, right? We're looking forward to next year, couple months. Stacy's going to talk to you all about it.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me? Okay. And I know someone's going to say, she talked about this in May, but I just want you guys to know, we are still getting tons of questions about appropriations and encumbrances. So these slides might look familiar. So if you'd like to have a conversation, I can run through them. But where are we missing it? Because I went over it in May, but you still, hey, I have a question. Does this need an appropriation? So how is the best way to present this is my question, because I feel like I give you the same slides because statute doesn't change on it, but we still have questions. So maybe it's me presenting incorrectly, or I don't know, but yes. Just, does this fund need to be appropriated? And I guess that's my question. And I don't care, I love when you guys call, but if you guys just want to call and not look it up, that's fine. But sometimes I'm going, maybe they're just missing it. But whenever we do you guys go to the statute to see if you need to appropriate it? Does anybody do that? Okay, Lori does. We're not surprised by that. Do some people go to the bulletin article that says you don't need an appropriation for these, but you need an appropriation for these? Okay, we got someone that goes there. Then who just relies on us to tell you if you need an appropriation? Okay, well, more people call me than that. So how do you guys make the determination then? I just want to hear anybody. Like, do you guys just go, well, I always need an additional appropriation, or we need an appropriation to spend for this because that's a common rule? So I guess I'm trying to get, what do you guys do and how do you figure it out?
My current auditor tells me.
Okay, so there's some that just know it, okay? But if you don't, you can always go back to the statute. And I think, how many people have a difficult time looking up statute? Okay, we do have some people that have difficult time. No. Okay, let's see. Okay, there's my cute kid. Yeah, he's adorable. If you got a high five from him, you should feel privileged. So if you didn't, he'll be around later and you can ask for a high five. I'm not gonna tell you you won't get sick, because I don't know where his hands have been. So I'm just putting that out there. He maybe licked the floor of our carpet last night, but I'm not, it maybe happened. I don't really know. So, okay, first we're gonna start on appropriations, because we're so excited. Okay, did you guys know that this has a laser pointer? I'm gonna use it, because I feel like I should, right? Okay, control over the funds. To disperse, you need to consider the balance in the fund. Funds may not be overspent as a general rule. If you're in the red, that's a problem. Please don't do that. And remember, permission to spend appropriations. There must be the authority to disperse the funds. So, how many of you have controls in place to make sure that whenever claim comes in, that you have an appropriation to spend and you have enough money in the fund to spend? Is that, raise your hands. Okay. So this might just be one person's job in the office, multiple people's jobs, or multiple people check this because we're wanting to make sure, hey, we have an appropriation to spend and we have the money to spend in the fund. So again, I think you guys know this, but there are some other people that don't know this. So if that person says, well, I can just spend the money, can you? Do you have the appropriation? You can tell them to give us a call, and we'll talk to them about it. But remember, there are some funds that don't require an appropriation. So again, that's why statute comes into effect so easily, because the question is, does statute state, hey, you are required to have an appropriation to spend these funds, or you do not require an appropriation to spend? So that's what we're looking for. But again, statute, there's gray area. That's why I am not an attorney, and we have one. So I don't have to read those things. So we understand that. Did it go? Okay, it did. I don't like it behind me. This is very odd because I can't see it. Okay, appropriation to spend. IC 511-112 authorizes the State Board of Accounts to formulate, prescribe, and install a system of accounting and reporting, okay? We know this. We refer to this as our uniform compliance guidelines, so our manuals, and the information found in the state examiner directives, manuals, bulletins. When you reach out to us, we are providing our uniform guidance. We look to state statute, federal guidelines, and our accounting and uniform compliance guidelines to answer your questions, okay? We're not just going, well, Lori said you're supposed to do this. We go back and we confirm what Lori says, but she has the answer right most of the time, right? When you ask if an appropriation is needed, we start with this statute that's up here, 36252B. There should be an appropriation unless statute specifically states that an appropriation is not needed. Can anyone name one of those funds, just for fun? Ricky, since you're the only one.
Microphone's off. Hold on. Oh.
Yes.
One that doesn't need an appropriation?
Doesn't need
Recorder's Perpetuation Fund.
And I heard someone whisper that up here. So Gold Star, who whispered it? Oh, good job. See, he sits up front. Tomorrow I expect you all to sit up front, okay? So just for example, that's one of those.
You're right. Title 40.
And the way that the statute reads is, the county recorder may use any money in the fund without appropriation for. So if the statute is silent, then we default back to that statute right there, okay? That an appropriation is needed. But again, for this example, it says that the fund without appropriation. So again, I have that down here, but not on the slides. So it's what does statute say? So that's a lot of the time, that's be my first place. Again, you guys have a very hard job. You guys are probably like, I just know this, so I don't need to go look it up. But if I was new and I was in your guys' position, I'm pretty sure I would have the chart of accounts with the Indiana codes like printed on my desk, and I'd just be like, what can I use this fund for and how do I spend the money? It's like one of the very first things Ricky said is print this, have it on your desk, and when they call you and ask you a question, just pull up the statute. I'm like, okay.
That's still on my desk.
Yes. Lori probably has memorized it, so she does.
Absolutely.
It's on her desk too. So it's Lori approved, seal of approval. Print that thing off, okay? So do we have questions on this specifically? So if it's in statute, go with what's in statute. If statute is silent, go back to this Indiana code. Okay. Okay, publishing a budget. On this chapter of budgeting, this is specific for counties, and in IC 6-1.1-17 and 18 that's on the slide are for budgeting statutes for any units that levy taxes. So the one on the screen states that budgets must be published at any part of the budget that is higher than the published amount is void. Oh, hold on, I misread that. Then is higher than the published amount is void. We often get questions on this, on what has to be published. Per the statute, the entire budget has to be published, and if you are making changes to increasing the budget that was published, you would need to provide notice of those changes. So I believe that's a question we get a lot, is, hey, we made changes, do I need to republish? We're going to refer you to this statute, or if it's a day where I'm like, I don't know where to find that statute, I'm going to say, call DLGF. Sorry, I do that sometimes because I can't find it right off the bat. And I'm like, this isn't me, guys, but I know you guys like calling us, and I love that. But some days I'm like, I don't know, DLGF does a lot of stuff, and I just don't know what they want from you. So I'm going to tell you, hey, go look here, or give DLGF a ring. They're going to tell you what you need to do. So do we have any questions on publishing the budget? No? Okay, disbursements under budget. One of the compliance items that we audit for is expenditures for the year did not exceed the amount certified in the budget or amended by additional appropriations. So if we do find during audit that you did spend in excess of what you have appropriated, it could be a reportable comment. It just kind of depends. So it's one of those things where we're auditing compliance. So did you spend more than what was appropriated? So I really hope you guys haven't, right? You're all perfect. You have appropriations, and we're not spending in excess, right? So no one's going to get a comment about that. Actually, I don't think, tomorrow I'm going to talk about comments, and I don't think there were any comments of the reports I looked at. So you guys are doing really good on this. So whatever your controls are in place to make sure that you're not spending in excess, you're doing a great job. So round of applause for you guys, okay? You guys are doing great. So again, if you have controls in place to review the unused appropriations before you approve a claim, you can avoid this issue. We look at the total disbursement for the fund, compare them to the approved budget amounts plus additional appropriations. We look at last year's encumbrances. So there are audit steps that we do for compliance to make sure. And sometimes the field examiners might be asking you these questions. If it looks like maybe you did spend in excess, they might not be thinking of an additional appropriation that you did receive. So there might be some questions where if they ask you about appropriations, this might be kind of what they're looking at. Okay. Disbursements without appropriation. So when does the statute provide otherwise? So I see 362914 specifically states SBOA called conferences, surplus tax refunds, distributions to other taxing units, Title 4D funds, repayment of temporary loans. This statute takes up almost 2 pages, but I do have the font very big, so it might be a smaller statute. But if for some reason you guys have a question, this might be a good frame of reference as of, hey, is there any that I can spend without appropriation? If so, there's some of them that are listed. There are, I believe, 9 things listed in this statute. IC 511.14.1 provides that all payments of mileage and lodging shall be made from the general fund from any money not otherwise appropriated and without any previous appropriation being made therefore. You do not need an appropriation to make refunds for tax surplus. I feel like, or for surplus tax. That is one we get a lot of questions on. Distributions of property taxes, excise tax, lit taxes to other taxing units do not require appropriation. Like I already said, Title 4D incentive funds can be spent without appropriation. You do not need an appropriation to, again, repay a temporary loan. In addition, there are some situations when the disbursement may be made after the appropriation by the council, but does not require additional appropriation requests approved by DLGF. So something like this would be the Supplemental Adult Probation Services and Supplemental Juvenile Probation Services, county user fees. I kind of just have a list or some examples. So do we have questions on this statute? Or you guys are just like, get to the encumbrances already, because I don't know what those are. Okay. Well, before I get there, I want to talk about home rule funds, obviously. Okay, so we do get questions a lot about appropriating local funds. Home rule funds are established, again, by local ordinances. The ordinances would establish the source of the funding, the purpose, the allowable use of the funds. This fund still does require appropriation by council and reporting to DLGF. It should be part of the budget process. There is an AG, Attorney General opinion on this topic, that a home ruled fund still requires appropriation by the county council. So do we have any questions on home rule funds? No? Super clear. Okay, this next slide, can anyone tell me, without looking at your slides, what's the IC code for additional appropriations? Lori's probably the only one that can rattle it off, because you guys asked me regarding additional appropriations a lot. So, I think we send this to you at least, I think I send 5 emails with this statute a week. IC 6-1.1-18-5, if the proper officers of a political subdivision desire to appropriate more money for a particular year than the amount prescribed in the budget for the year as finally determined under this article, they shall give notice of their proposed additional appropriations. So I bet you guys, how many of you have already done additional appropriations this year? Right? Okay, that's what I thought. So you guys know about this, right? So I'm not going to get any more questions. I'm just kidding. Okay, so we get it. You guys know what additional appropriations are. But there are some exceptions. So there are actually 3 sections of statute that go over these, and I didn't want to put the statute on the slide because, again, I've went over this before, but I wanted to tell you guys the exceptions again. Insurance refunds, reimbursement of state and federal grants, erroneous or excessive disbursements. So these are some of the exceptions in the statutes in which they're noted in. Any question on exceptions? No? Okay, you guys just really want me to get to the encumbrances. I get it. Okay, transfer of appropriations. I feel like I don't get this question as much from you guys, but from other departments emailing us, asking about how to transfer of appropriations. So another method of dealing with insufficient appropriation is to transfer of an appropriation. If the transfer is within the same department, budget, and same major classification, the county auditor, if county policy allows, so if you guys have a different county policy, take that into consideration, or the council can approve the transfer. An example of this would be if a department within the general fund has several items of appropriation within their supplies budget and wants to transfer appropriation from one line in the supplies budget to another line in the supplies budget. When the transfer of appropriation is from one major budget classification to another within the budget, this requires approval. When the transfer of appropriation from one major classification to another major budget classification within a budget, this requires approval of the council. The auditor can make this transfer without council approval. An example of this would be a department within the general fund wants to transfer appropriation from one line within the supplies to personal services. I feel like I kind of messed that up, or I missed a line. So if it's within the same departmental budget and same major budget classification, auditor or council per policy, this can be done. Between major budget classifications, this would require council approval. Sorry, I was reading my notes and not the slide. That would have made it much easier to understand. Okay. I feel like I have a lot of sheriffs call and ask this question. So if you ever want to send them this slide, you can, and then say, call Ricky and Stacy or Lori. They'll explain it. Let's keep talking about it. Okay. If the transfer is across departmental budgets, this requires approval of the DLGF as well as council knowledge, like we just talked about. In this case, for whatever reason, the department budget is not sufficient and requires additional appropriation, even if the appropriation comes from another budget or department within the fund. From a high-level understanding of the budget, every additional appropriation should have a reason, and knowing what those reasons are should be incorporated in developing future budgets. So if it's something to where they're always asking for the same thing, maybe it's worth in the future making the adjustment beforehand. Hey, maybe we need to budget a little bit more. Again, a little bit more planning for the future, so it's not something to where you're always having to do these transfers between different departments and budget lines and everything like that. It might make your guys' job a little bit easier, but we do understand with turnover, it kind of makes it harder. So let's see. It is possible for an emergency to occur that was not, again, you didn't anticipate it, such as like a heavy snowfall affecting the budget and plowing roads and salt and things like that. So there might be something to where you need to shift around in your budget because, again, it's something unexpected. You didn't know that it was going to happen. However, this would be a major change in the advertised budget and would require following the additional appropriations procedures that we already talked about, reduce one department's budget, increase another. Overall, the budget for the fund didn't change. We just moved things around. So if you guys want to look at 6-1.1.18.6, that again talks about the transfer of money from one budget classification to another. Transfer funds. You may transfer from a fund's cash balance only if there is an authority to make the transfer. So I feel like we have a lot of confusion when, not you guys, other departments call us and they say, hey, I need to transfer money. The first question is, you're a department. You can't transfer money. What are you talking about, appropriation? So sometimes it's that confusion of, are we talking about the transfer of an appropriation or are we talking about the transfer of cash, of actual cash? So that's sometimes, again, I think it's hard to explain that, to say, hey, what are we actually talking about? Are we just wanting to move stuff around in your budget, or are we talking about actual transfer of cash? Because again, they can't do that. So transfer of cash balances and transfer of appropriations are, again, two separate things, but they are interchanged a lot. So I think that is from more so departments, not necessarily you guys. And I feel like we have a lot of conversations with other departments about, hey, this is actually an appropriation. Hey, this is cash balance. So, I mean, if for some reason you guys aren't getting through to them, Ricky and I'd love to have that conversation with them, try and help them explain it versus, hey, we're talking budget or we're talking cash, and kind of help them go from there. Because again, we're here to support you guys, the whole county. So we're more than willing to have that conversation. So the State Board of Accounts prescribes the use of fund accounting to provide for the accountability of these activities and financial status. This means that the individual funds are used to segregate financial activity, again, sources and uses. So there is what, you just need to make sure, again, we're not spending in excess of the appropriation. So that's what this all comes back to. So let's just make sure that we have a decent appropriation. Okay. I wanted to put an example of transfer of funds. So in the rainy day fund, there is actually an example, and I tried to put it, it's in section D. That's why I wanted to put it on there, because this is when you can transfer funds and when it is allowed in statute. So transfer of any unused or encumbered funds specified in section B to A from any fiscal year to the rainy day fund, and then it goes to section or D2, transfer of any other unobligated cash. So this is an example of whenever you can do a cash transfer and it's allowed in statute. So whenever we talk about the authority to transfer money, we're not talking about appropriation, we're talking about the authority to actually transfer cash. So in statute, if there's something, back. Hold on, where's my pointer? Something that looks like this. That's what we're looking for. So sometimes Ricky or I will send you an email and says, where's the statutory authority to transfer that money? That's what we're looking for. So again, we pull up our handy dandy chart of accounts with our Indiana codes. We pull up that chart of account and we're looking for, in that statute, where's the authority to transfer the funds? Say, does that make sense? My mouth is very dry. So I'm sorry. I feel like my lips are sticking together. So I'm sorry. If you're front row, you're seeing it. So I'm sorry. Okay. Hey, grant funds. You're amazing. Okay, grant funds. We get this question a lot. So do we get it, or is it your guys' departments that are having the difficulty with understanding if they need an appropriation or not? Raise your hand if it's the department's problem and not your fault. Okay, Monroe was all like, it's their fault. Just called you guys out, sorry. It was so fast. Bree was like, yes. Okay, so sometimes there is questions. So grants. Basically, grants come in two forms, again, advance and reimbursement. In an advance grant, the grantor agency gives you the full grant up front or a portion each month, depending on how much. The key to this is that the grant funds are advanced to the county in order for them to fulfill the purpose of the grant. So federal grants, again, they come directly from the feds to the county. Few federal grants are advanced, but they do exist. Most of the time you guys have reimbursements, so right now I'm just talking about advance. So if you receive an advance grant, the grant agreement is your permission to spend and takes the place of the appropriation in this case. The amount that you can spend is limited to the amount you receive, and the allowable costs will be defined by the grant agreement. Clear as mud, right? How many of you actually have advance grants? Okay, there are some out there. Again, there's not a whole bunch of them. If an advance grant requires a local match, the local match does need to be appropriated. So remember that. Okay, let's keep talking about grant funds. State grants do require appropriation. If the grant allows you to fund or partially fund operations of the county, this is important that the revenues supplied by the grant be included in your overall county's budget, so the county can determine how much additional county funds will need to fund the particular operation. So again, if it's something that you guys aren't doing, haven't done before, you guys need to incorporate this into your budget. For example, if you receive state money for operating the jail, you would want to include that in the county's overall budget for the jail. So just make sure you include it. However, if you receive an advance grant and the grant agreement provides a detailed budget by major classification of expenses, and you spend the funds in compliance with the budget, we will not take audit exception if the county has not appropriated the grant funds. So again, that's in case of an advance grant. Reimbursement grants. Okay, I need to speed up because I need to talk about encumbrances. Okay, reimbursement grants. The initial expenditure from county funds needs appropriation. So again, it's reimbursement. You have to spend the county funds first, then you receive reimbursement for those. So you would need that appropriation for the spending for reimbursement. Reimbursement may be reappropriated by council, so whenever we say that, it's not the initial expenses. Again, you're already appropriating that. The reimbursement is what you receive back that may need to be reappropriated to spend, okay? So again, you're getting the money, then you need to appropriate it so you can spend that money. Okay, encumbrances. We have several bulletin articles on encumbrances. So encumbrances are accounting mechanisms to hold over a portion of the prior year's budget of expenses paid in the current year. So these are approved by council and must have an underlying reason. And here's a fun fact. Just because an unused appropriation exists, there's no requirement to spend it. I know some people call us and say, Well, I have an appropriation. Most of the time it's the departments, it's not you guys. They go, I'll have an appropriation. And they're like, we need to spend it before the year's over. You don't have to spend it before the year's over. No one's going to come and take the money from you. And I think I've told someone that on the phone. It's not like they take it back. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be in the fund. It's just going to be reappropriated at the beginning of the year. It doesn't just poof into thin air. So let's remember that. Let's quickly go over reasons for encumbrances. Lawful contract that has not been fully paid. So do you have a contract that might go from 1 year to the next? You still have a couple payments left on that. You can encumber that money because you know that you are going to need to pay that in full. A purchase order paid prior to December 31st. Bond issue proceeds, state or federal grant contract or agreement with a local match of funds. So we're really looking for anything that the county is bound in contract to pay. So we need to have that kind of supporting documentation to encumber. Does anyone have questions on encumbrances? Okay, encumbrances for fiscal year grants. Budgeted January 1 to December 31st, encumbrances need to carry appropriations into the new budget year. If there's a grant period July 1 to June 30, no encumbrances needed on June 30th, because again, you guys aren't doing fiscal year, you guys are doing calendar year budgeting, so you need to do it for the end of the year. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys didn't really need that presentation. You guys are all pros. You got this. And I only have a minute. Go me. Okay, I think you have a whole DLGF team that's getting ready to come up here. And I know you're excited because they're going to talk about CNAV. I think they're going to debrief you on it, is my understanding. So if you guys want to start coming up here and we'll trade, and I'll pull up your PowerPoint slides. Thank you for your time.